One of the reasons why I was drawn into Granblue Fantasy universe is Narmaya. Not only she is a certified waifu, but she mastered the way of the sword, so maining her was a no-brainer in my case. I'm the samurai and I will be covering her playstyle in great detail, how to play her, what skill to use, the latest build for her, and more. So ultimately you will be mastering her as well and even have more fun with this awesome character. I see Narmaya's playstyle as a little bit busier compared to the other characters in the game since the user needs to focus on a couple of things to be able to use her effectively in combat. I will be breaking down the key features of her playstyle so that you can understand her gameplay flow pretty easily. For starters, players will be switching back and forth between Dawnfly stance and Free Flutter stance, demonstrating a loop to be able to accumulate butterflies when landing combo finishers to deal even more damage with her skills. Let's start with Dawnfly stance first. This stance mostly deals with wide arcing katana slashes, effective when dealing with hordes of enemies. Narmaya will deal with 5 consecutive unsheathing attacks, and these attacks have slower attack speed compared to her Free Flutter attack combinations. Note that prioritizing Free Flutter stance is more optimal in terms of dealing damage, so usually you would always want to transition to this stance or to the Free Flutter stance as fast as you can, and for you to do so, simply watch the 4th hit of the Dawnfly attack combination and press and hold the normal attack button. If you've done it correctly, you will notice that she will charge her attack and be ready for a wide unsheathing attack. Release the attack if you've noticed that the area of effect turns pink, and she will unleash a special charge attack which will later glow after its animation, signaling that you can finally change to a different stance. After seeing the glow, mashing the combo finisher button will let you transition to Free Flutter stance. If you have done this correctly, Narmaya will unleash what I call stance switch attack, and from Dawnfly stance, she will release a powerful shockwave that deals damage over time to targets. Know that you managed to switch to Free Flutter stance, it is time to discuss it. Free Flutter is a stance catered mostly to single target enemies and hits harder and faster compared to Dawnfly attack combinations. When performing attacks under this stance by mashing the normal attack button, Narmaya will deal with a speedy consecutive attack combination and finish it with a powerful windmill attack. After the windmill attack combination, you will notice that she will glow again, signaling the player that it is time to do a stance switching attack. Switch to Dawnfly stance by pressing the combo finisher button, and once again, she will do a special stance switch attack where she will unleash a barrage of slashes. After switching back to Dawnfly stance, the main key point here is we will be skipping the normal attack combination of Dawnfly stance since generally we want to be in Free Flutter stance always since it deals more damage to single targets, and you can do so by holding the normal attack button and ready for another charge attack. Release the charge attack and quickly switch back to Free Flutter stance and exhaust its combos once again, and once you reach the end of its attack animation, which is the windmill attack, ready to stance switch once again to Dawnfly and simply repeat. In this manner, we can skip the normal attack combinations of Dawnfly stance and access Free Flutter much faster while accumulating butterfly in the process. Understanding how Narmaya's stance loop works is basically the most important part of her rotation. Once you master this aspect, everything else will be a sure cakewalk. Now that the basics of Narmaya gameplay are out of the way, it is time for more tips that will further enhance your gameplay. The first tip that I have for you is don't neglect Dawnfly stance. Staying on pre-flutter stance always and neglecting Dawnfly stance is not advisable since stance switching attacks can pretty much deal tons of damage as well, and you will also accumulate butterflies in the process. The second tip that I have for you is that Narmaya can accumulate butterflies by doing link attacks, landing combo finishers, or stance switch attacks. Players can then accumulate up to 6 butterflies max, and the higher the butterfly count, the stronger the skills can deal damage. Next is, link attacks can lead you to a stance switch attack. When landing a link attack, mash the combo finisher button and Narmaya will do a stance switch attack. This is pretty useful since players can transition to a stance quickly. Make it a habit to do a stance switch attack every after a link attack. This will net you easy butterflies in the process and deal extra damage from stance switch attacks. Faster access to Free Flutter stance. Performing skills can also let you access Free Flutter stance much faster. Whenever in Dawnfly stance and you use an offensive skill like Setsuna or Kyoka Suigetsu for example, you can quickly access a charge attack and lead you to a stance switch to Free Flutter stance. The second one is make sure you have butterflies before using skills. As mentioned previously, the higher the butterflies, the stronger your skill can deal damage. It is advisable to use a skill whenever Narmaya has 6 butterflies in total, and the animations of her skill will also change in the process and deal tons of damage. Although there are certain situations in which you will need to use skills even having 2 to 4 butterflies, and it's okay, and I do this a lot. The main challenge here is monitoring her butterflies since it is hard to see most of the time, especially when in the heat of battle. Now that the gameplay tips are out of the way, let's move on to Narmaya's recommended skills. For the sake of the video, I will not be going over every one of her skills, but instead provide the best and essential ones for you to be able to deal the best damage possible. The first skill on the list is Kyoka Suigetsu. This is a mandatory skill since this is Narmaya's gap closing skill. This skill ensures that you will be in toe-to-toe with bosses constantly to deal damage, especially when dealing with mobile bosses. Next is Transient, which is Narmaya's second hardest damage dealing skill. Most importantly, only use this skill when you are in Free Flutter stance. When doing this skill in Free Flutter stance, it deals much more damage compared when doing it in Dawnfly stance. Moving on to the next skill, which is Setsuna. Setsuna is the strongest skill of Narmaya, however has a long charge time. It is challenging to adjust to this skill, especially for beginners since it is advisable to fully charge it to deal even more damage. Note as well that the more butterflies you have, the faster your Setsuna's charge time can go. However, there are times that you will use its uncharged version when the situation calls for it, like when the boss is nearing its bloodthirst mode, so it is better to use this skill than not dealing damage at all. As you master Narmaya, adapting to this skill will not be an issue over time. The next skill on the list is Dance of Link Petals, which grants Narmaya a supplementary damage, stout heart, and 30% attack buff. Upon usage, the user will also gain 3 butterflies in the process right off the bat. I do want to mention as well that supplementary damage buff that this skill provides stacks with your supplementary damage trait, which will be equipping her later on. But before anything else, if you are into straight to the point guides, or just love Japanese role-playing games like this one or RPGs in general, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button and it will surely help me a lot, and join our Discord server as we are building an empire where you can find like-minded people who loves the genre. Now back to the video. Now that skills are out of the way, let's move on to Narmaya's build, starting with her suggested weapon first. For the sake of the video, of course, you will not have access to your final weapon, so I will quickly suggest using Florentium Blade first. And then when you unlock your Ascension weapon, which is Venustas, you will need to max this weapon and fully awaken it if Narmaya is your first character, or perhaps your main character. After maxing Venustas, you will then eventually use Ameno Habakiri, and all of the characters in this game need to have their terminus weapons eventually or their final weapons. You will be upgrading this one to its maximum level and fully awaken it to provide the best possible attack stats for Narmaya. This weapon provides a level 25 catastrophe trait which increases attack stats by 50% and damage cap by 100% when HP is below 45k. Also with level 15 regen, not a big deal and good as a bonus, a level 5 damage cap and sigil booster trait which increases all of your traits by 1. Totally the best slot weapon for Narmaya as of the moment. For Ameno Habakiri's Right Stone on the other hand, it is advisable to use a Vitality Right Stone with a level 10 critical hit chance. This is mandatory so you can reach the 100% critical hit chance later on. For the second and third traits, it is hard to recommend exact traits due to RNG reasons, but if you can slot in DPS oriented traits like Combo Booster, Skill Assault, Charge Attack Damage, or like what I have here, the better. So far, this is the best one that I do have. Just work with what you currently have. Moving on to Mastery next, and of course pretty much by now, 100% max Mastery progress is a must. What I want to focus on is what over masteries should be prioritizing. The general rule of thumb is to focus on the following bonuses, and this applies to almost every character. It is recommended to aim for a critical hit rate up 20%, normal attack damage cap up 20%, and skill damage cap up by 20% as well. The first slot could be anything, and it's just that I was lucky to have that 20% skill damage up. If you manage to have a critical hit rate of 20% and follow the rest of the setup here, you will be hitting 100% critical hit rate, which is ideal. So far, these are the best ones that I have, so I may need to work on this later on. Suggested weapons are out of the way, let's discuss my recommended sigils and trait setups. I will be providing 2 sets of setups depending on how good you are in the game. Note that these setups are not the best out there, I am just simply working with what I have. Starting with offensive setup first. This setup is recommended for experienced players since it lacks a lot of defensive utility. This setup uses the latest exclusive beta and gamma sigils from Lucilius. If you are looking for a general setup, I have one prepared for you after this one. So moving on to the recommended traits. So the first one on the list is Narmaya's Awakening Sigil. Butterfly's Grace is necessary since it adds one more butterfly when Narmaya lands a combo finisher or a link attack, while Butterfly's Valor grants Narmaya the ability to not consume her butterflies after using a skill by 50%. Both traits are highly recommended since the majority of Narmaya's additional damage comes from her butterflies. Although I do not prefer its RNG side of things since I wish it could have been a straight damage augmenting effect on the other hand. The next trait on the list is a level 30 beta trait which adds 50% damage cap and shorten the skill cooldown by 10% upon activating your SBA. I chose to equip the beta sigil since the majority of Narmaya's damage comes from her skills, so raising my skill cap would be ideal. The 10% of skill cooldown reduction is more of a bonus. Next is a level 30 gamma trait which provides a general 30% damage cap boost to this build along with a shield that activates and nullifies up to 50k damage after activating your SBA. Having that 30% additional damage cap is beneficial for this build, especially since I am seeing a lot of damage improvements after being buffed by Cagliostro in online sessions. The shield for the most part is rather a bonus and it's nice to have since this build lacks defensive utilities and it saves me occasionally when making mistakes in combat. The next sigil on the list is damage cap, and by now we all know how damage cap works and how it is essential in terms of dealing damage overall. A level 65 damage trait is essential to reach the highest damage potential possible. Next up is supplementary damage sigil, and having at least level 45 for this trait is a must to take advantage of its immense additional damage. A huge percentage of Narmaya's damage comes from this trait, so it is mandatory and you can see it in our damage test later on. The next trait on the list is Skilled Assault Sigils. The level 15 Skilled Assault trait provides a 72% skill damage boost to this build, making Narmaya's skill stronger, especially Setsuna. Reaching its damage cap was a pain, so at least adding more damage to it is somehow beneficial. The next trait on the list is a level 15 quick cooldown trait. Having at least a level 15 quick cooldown trait is beneficial for any build, but of course, having a level 45 of quick cooldown is the goal. But since I do not have Sup 5 Plus at the moment, this is the best setup that I can go to for this build. Of course, the faster you have access to your skills, the better the damage overall. The next trait on the list is a level 15 Tyranny trait which adds 36% attack to this build. This trait helps us to reach the damage cap overall, and that 20% HP loss will help you achieve the Catastrophe trait to make your HP stay below 45k if you slot this build with an Aegis trait. Usually, if you have quick cooldown, you do have at least a level 15 Cascade as well. This will lessen your skill cooldown by 1.6% whenever your attacks hit an enemy. Another essential trait to have is at least level 15 critical hit rate, which provides 30% additional critical hit chance. This will help us achieve the 100% critical hit chance required for this build. The good old level 15 stamina trait is still suggested for more damage. The 51% additional attack that this trait provides is recommended for this build. Now that we've tackled the core traits for this build, it is time for other trait suggestions. We have little to no slot to work on here because of the beta and gamma combination, and the only trait that you can change here is the Cascade trait. You will lose DPS by losing that 1.6% skill cooldown reduction. However, if you want more survivability, I suggest changing Cascade to Aegis or like a improved dodge or potion hoarder to increase your overall survivability. Now the offensive setup is done, let's move on to the general setup. This setup mostly follows the meta DPS currently, and by now you've seen this setup a lot. The selling point of this build is you can slot in a handful of defensive utilities, perfect for the general player base. I will just go over to the changes that I have made compared to the previous setup. The first one on the list is a level 45 quick cooldown trait, so you will have faster access to your skills. The next trait recommended is a level 15 improved dodge trait. This is a personal favorite since it increases the number of dodge by 4 and also increases dodge window time, which is really good for almost everything in the game. Moving on to the next trait, which is a potion hoarder. At level 15, it will give you an additional 3 green potions, 5 mega potions, 5 blue potions, and plus 2 revival potions. Very helpful for a lot of players, so this trait is mandatory in a sense, especially if you are still adjusting to the game. Other trait suggestions for this general build would be Aegis if you love to have at least 41k HP at your disposal. I suggest replacing the improved dodge trait if you prefer to have more HP. Guts is pretty much useful as well, however I tend to drop it in exchange for potion hoarders, so if you want to withstand heavy attacks and not die, this is an option as well. The overall build is out of the way, let's now move on to damage test. In this section, I will be providing damage results samples for Proto Bahamut and Lucilius fights for the aforementioned builds. I usually do 3 test fights when I perform optimally. Note that the results varies if there were buffers around here, especially Cagliostro. Note that these are not the best damage results out there, and I know a lot of people can do better and score way higher. So we're starting with the first one, which is the offensive build. So let's start with Proto Bahamut test results first. We can observe that the damage results are usually around 200k to 240k average DPS, and fights usually last around 2 minutes and 30 seconds to 3 minutes. Moving on to Lucilius damage results, we are seeing 180k damage to 200k damage on average DPS, and fights usually last around 4 to 5 minutes. Time for the general build, and starting with Proto Bahamut first. I'm seeing 170k to 180k damage for the average DPS and when performing optimally. Fights with Proto usually last around the same time as the previous build. Lucilius damage test, on the other hand, we can observe 160k to 190k average DPS. Same goes for clear times. 4 to 5 minutes are my usuals when using this build. Although we can say that I am seeing a noticeable increase in my overall damage, it is more of a question if you are willing to sacrifice almost every defensive utility you have. I'm hoping you've learned something so far, and Narmaya is definitely fun to use and I enjoyed making this guide. Let me know in the comments what you think of Narmaya so far, or if I forgot to mention any tips that you might have. However, if you are new to Relink and want to have the best start possible, click the videos here and I will catch you on the next one.